Commissioner Murphy. It's 6 p.m. You can call the meeting to order.
Great, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I call to order the meeting for the Cotati Planning Commission meeting on September 7th, 2021. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Rodriguez. Can you hear us, Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yeah, I am here.
Thank you. Commissioner Hancock?
Yes, I am here.
Commissioner
Present.
Murphy?
Here. Okay, and we'll move into item C, which is changes to the agenda.
There are no changes proposed to the agenda.
Wonderful, thank you. And before we move into item D, I just wanted to confirm there's no approval of the minutes, of any minutes.
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Then we'll move into item D, which is oral and written comment. So just a reminder to please say your name for the record. And sorry, limit your comments to the items that are not agendized for tonight's discussion. And I'll go on mute so we can see if anyone has comments.
Thank you, Chair Murphy. Also looking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use a raise hand icon. And that will end public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move into item E, which is matters at hand. It looks like we're starting with the consideration of resolution to recommend the adoption of a mitigated negative declaration and approval of zoning code text amendment to allow storage, warehouse, and indoor storage. So I will hand it over to staff to walk us through that item.
Chair Murphy and commission members, we will go on to the PowerPoint presentation. So the item before you is the Sandale Warehouse. It's a proposed development, zoning code text amendment, use permit design review. Next slide, please. So the project consists of constructing a new 50,064 square foot warehouse building on an 8.48 acre vacant parcel. The proposed warehouse building is to be used as a moving and storage company. Access to the project will be from the west end of Blodgett Street. The project includes the construction of a cul-de-sac at the end of Blodgett Street to provide a formal standard terminus to the street. Next slide, please. So this are some photos of the proposed use, how it works. These are called pods, portable on-demand storage systems. So the photograph on the left is showing the portable storage unit that would be taken from the warehouse to, let's say, somebody's house for loading or unloading. It would come to your house, would be parked in the driveway. Then the owner or the person who's, let's say, moving would pack up the container themselves, and when it's loaded, then they would call pods and they would come pick up the portable unit on the truck, and that could either be delivered locally or be taken back to the warehouse. Next slide, please. So the photo on the upper left shows how they would be stored inside the warehouse. This is a climate controlled building. Typically, this would be household things for people moving. The photo on the right shows the outdoor storage of the empty units. So if you have people's belongings in it, then that's stored inside the empty units that are waiting to go out to people that are moving. Those would be stored outside. If somebody's moving outside of the area to another state, for example, then a semi truck, the pods would be loaded onto a semi truck in the photo below and taken outside the area. Next slide, please. So this is showing the project location in northwest Cotati. It's the area outlined in blue at the very end of Blodgett Street. Next slide, please. This is showing the general plan designation for the area. So the area in gray is the city's commercial industrial general plan designation. So if you see where it says site at the end of Blodgett Street, that entire gray area is the same general plan designation of commercial industrial. Next slide, please. This shows the zoning for the area. So if you see where it says site in the light gray, that is commercial industrial. So the city's general plan is one designation of general industrial, then it's divided into two zoning designations. Basically a heavy industrial area and a light. So the area on the other side of the Laguna de Santa Rosa to the north, that's a heavier industrial area. And the area to the where the project site is on Blodgett Street, that's the lighter industrial area that we have. Next slide, please. This shows the general site in the vicinity. So where it says site at the end of Blodgett Street, that is the 8.4 acre site, which you see is vacant. It's flat, it has no trees. To the north is the Laguna de Santa Rosa, which is channelized with a path on a bike path on the north side. Then you see the general heavier industrial area to the north. Then the area to the south, that's the Marin Sonoma County Vector Control District facilities. Then the area to the east, to the right side of the site, that is the existing industrial development along Blodgett Street. And if you see the end of Blodgett Street, it just terminates, and there is no turnaround there currently. It's just a dead-end street. Next slide, please. So this is showing the general site layout. So you see to the right where Blodgett Street terminates. This project will be constructing a cul-de-sac bulb, which will terminate as a public street with a turnaround. And just to let you know, I was out at the site this afternoon just looking things over, and while I was out there, there was a UPS semi-truck making a delivery along Blodgett Street, and I was curious how it was going to get out and turn around. And so what that truck did, since there is no turnaround there currently, it actually had to go through another property that it was not making a delivery to go around that building to get out and go back on Blodgett Street. So that is a benefit of having this cul-de-sac. It will allow bigger trucks to make a turnaround without having to go through an adjacent property. So this project will construct the cul-de-sac, and it will be constructing the warehouse on the east side of the property. The storage units will be stored at the rear, at the back, so they're not visible or highly visible from Blodgett Street. They will be visible from properties, let's say the Vector Control District to the south. They would be visible. There would be screening with 8 feet of fencing and redwood trees, but they would be somewhat visible from adjacent properties, but they would not be relatively visible from the public street. Next slide, please. So the applicant's going to make a presentation that will go over the architecture in more detail, but this is give you an idea of the buildings, and it's showing the outdoor storage of the containers. You can see those in blue. Those are the blue doors on the bottom slide. Those are the containers stacked 3 tall, which is 24 feet. And on the upper elevation, you can see the size of the containers. So those are how the containers would be stored and stacked. And so they're shown at the maximum height that they would be allowed to be stacked, which is 3 high, 24 feet. Next slide, please. So going over the main zoning restrictions. So the minimum front setback required is 20 feet, and they're proposing a 20-foot consistent setback. The minimum site setback for this site, since it's not abutting residential, is 0. They don't need any setback on the side. They're proposing a minimum setback of 26 feet. The minimum rear setback required by the zoning district is 30 feet, and this building's proposed about 500 feet from the west property line. The maximum height allowed is 40 feet, and this project is proposing the maximum of 40 feet. The parking requirement for this use is 53 spaces. The applicant is proposing 45 spaces. And they're proposing a 15% reduction, which is allowed by our code by conditional use permit. Next slide, please. So the recommended actions before the commission, one of them is a zoning code text amendment. Currently, our code does not allow for this use. So the proposal is to amend section 172220, table 2.3, and that's to add storage warehouse inside storage to table 2-3 to allow the proposed moving and storage use within the CI, commercial industrial district, with approval of a use permit. Next slide, please. So this is showing the table from our zoning code, section 172220. So along the top, it shows the various zoning districts. So the fourth one over is the CI district. That's the zoning district we're discussing tonight, the CI district. And as you move down the chart in red, it's a proposed addition, which is storage warehouse indoor storage. And the UP, and that means use permit. On the other districts where it says MUP, that's minor use permit. And if it has a slash through it, that means that use is not allowed at all in that district. So the proposal before you is to add storage warehouse indoor storage to the CI district with a use permit. Next slide, please. The next action is also to allow the following uses by use permit. So this project requires a use permit for 3 different reasons. One is the use itself as a moving and storage company. As I described, the zoning code text amendment would allow this type of use with a use permit. The second type of use that needs a use permit is the outdoor storage of the portable storage containers. So in the city, all outdoor uses such as this require a use permit. So this project needs that just for the outdoor storage, and it's permitted only at the rear of the building as it's proposed. And the third reason why a use permit is required, this project is proposing a 15% parking reduction. Next slide, please. The last action is this project does need design review approval, and that's for the site plan, which we've gone over briefly, the warehouse building itself and the landscaping. Next slide, please. And the last action I'm discussing is the environmental review. This project is subject to the California Environmental Quality Act. Initial study mitigated negative declaration was prepared by staff. It was out for public review twice, each for 30 days. The first time was from July 2nd to August 2nd for 30 days, and went to the state clearinghouse. Was distributed publicly and to interested agencies. California Fish and Wildlife had some comments regarding the burrowing owl and the need for mitigation for possible impacts to the burrowing owl. So the mitigated negative declaration was amended to add mitigation for the burrowing owl and was recirculated for 30 days from August 7th to today. So that comment period ended at 5 o'clock today. And no comments have been received regarding the environmental review or any other issue on this project. Mitigation has been included for all potential significant environmental impacts. The project is required to receive a CTS, which is California Tiger Salamander incidental take permit prior to any grading or construction. The project includes the adoption of a mitigated negative declaration and the adoption of a mitigation monitoring and reporting plan. Next slide, please. Staff, in conclusion, staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing and adopt resolutions recommending that the City Council adopt a mitigated negative declaration, amend the land use code to allow storage warehouse indoor storage with a use permit within the CI district, and approve a use permit and preliminary and final design review to allow the construction of a new warehouse to be used by a moving and storage company. Next slide. And that concludes staff's presentations. Is there any questions of staff at this point? And just to let you know, the applicants will be making a PowerPoint presentation next. That's Bert Sandell will be making a presentation with his architect, and they may be going over more details regarding the proposed design.
Thank you, Joel. We can move into the next presentation.
Did I ask a question?
Absolutely, we can open it up to questions then. So
This would be questions from the Planning Commission to staff.
no problem. If we're in agreement that that's a little easier for each presentation, we can do that. So I'll open it up to questions and comments from the commission, and Commissioner Hancock, we'll start with you.
Yes, hi, thank you. So a lot of information has gone into the packet. Thank you very much, and appreciate that it got out early to give us a chance to look at it. The question generally in the bigger picture is the access to Blodgett Street via Elder Lane. I was just on Saturday, happened to be going down past Elder Lane to Shamrock, and there was a 3-car accident that just happened at that Elder Lane. I know there's a lot that is in the works as far as that goes, but is the northern part of Elder Lane is very narrow. So, you know, there is this Project Zero to try and look at zero pedestrian fatalities, and this seems to be setting up that if large vehicles can go down that area, down Alder Lane as it stands, this could be a problem. So I'm just wondering what the thoughts are on the staff about that. That's my first question. So
There was a traffic study done for this project, and what was concluded from the study is that this type of project would not be generating a significant increase in the amount of traffic and trucks on the existing streets. I understand the existing situation, but the way staff looked at this particular project is this project by itself was not going to be generating additional new impacts that this project would be responsible for. So there may be issues out there that the city would need to look at further, but it wasn't something that was required. This was a requirement for this project to correct.
yeah, it just seems to be adding to it. So I would just put it out there that it's a. I mean, I know the pedestrian and bicycle plan is coming up for review, but it just seems to me we're adding more and more traffic to an area that is becoming more pedestrian. We're planning more houses there and things. So anyway, I put that out there as well. I was also just talking to the neighbors on that, and they referenced that they thought there'd been some flooding on their portion of the property that backs onto the Laguna. And I'm just wondering, I mean, this is a general question, but would it be feasible to ask the applicant to install a marked surveyor indicator with a scale for where the floodplain marker is? There's that access in the northeast corner with it. So I'm just asking staff as to what their opinion is of something like that, making that request.
So I know that this, you can make the request. This issue regarding flooding was specifically looked at with some hydrology studies, because actually a portion of this project was technically within a floodplain. I know the applicant's team is here to maybe answer more questions regarding the floodplain, but the floodplain issue was specifically looked at with the environmental review of this project, and the applicants are making some changes. So they may be able to go over that issue in more detail.
I'm actually, what I'm thinking of is that for, you know, just generally in Cotati, I mean, it's a very wide open floodplain, and it seems like it has been brought up in the past. Would there ever be any, would the 100-year, the floodplain be exceeded? And it you know, it's a very difficult area to survey, but if there was a marker pole there that had been accurately surveyed in, if there was any flooding, it would be a reference point to look at. So that's really, you know, it's not about that generally, it's just, would it help for any determination should it occur, which is probably fairly unlikely, but is it going to be an easy marker to install with a gauge of some sort?
It seems like it would, but I think the applicants can probably, I don't see an issue with doing that unless the applicants have an issue that I'm not aware of.
I appreciate staff's opinion on that. And then the last question, just we've got another special request to modify the land use code. And I mean, it does seem to fit in. I'm not particularly having a problem, but this is the second time in a number of years after the inclusion of the elderly housing in the system. And I'm just wondering, what advice do you give to, to us from the Planning Commission to consider this and any other possible future items that come up for changes to the code?
Commissioner Hancock, I'd like to answer that, and thank you. This is something that we as staff understood is a very big deal to change the land use code, no question. But in looking at the fact that, our industrial area is one of our major job centers, and the fact that storage and warehousing is not an allowable use in an area with industrial uses, we actually thought that that could drive more impacts and create more traffic by forcing our businesses that are operating in these locations to rent warehouse space in other communities rather than being able to utilize an indoor storage or warehouse location directly in their own essentially backyards or next door to their facility. So it was a thoughtful consideration. And what I would just say is a lot of land use codes they're iterative in how they get created. And so while it's a very thoughtful, or it requires a very thoughtful approach, I do think it is appropriate and important to constantly be willing to consider these changes as they come up, whether they're recommended by staff or by requested by an applicant, because the markets change, the needs for different land uses are constantly in flux. And I think this example and the one you referenced are both really good to point out that not every code is perfect, and there are definitely going to be missing elements that could be addressed through making changes to either allow new things or to preclude things that we as a community don't think are appropriate for Cotati.
Thank you very much. That's end of me.
Thank you, Commissioner Hancock. And we'll remember to circle back to your second question there after the applicant speaks, in case there's additional feedback on that. Commissioner Rodriguez, do you have any questions?
Not at this time. I'm going to wait until after the presentation.
Okay, thank you. And I think because my questions are kind of a combination as well for staff and the applicant, I'll wait as well. So we will move into the next presentation.
One moment. Ready when you are. Joel, who's presenting this item?
It should be Bert Sandell, the applicant.
Yes, hello, Joel. Yes, this is Bert Sandell, Planning Commissioner Murphy and Planning Commissioners. Thank you very much for having us at this meeting. Unfortunately, my Wi-Fi system has failed, and I'm joining you by telephone. I'm hoping that my architect, Kevin O'Malley, can take point. Kevin, are you on this call?
Yes.
So perhaps what we can do is tag team this, Kevin. I apologize, technology being what it is. But in addition, let me start here, Kevin, and see how we do. Commissioners, in addition to thanking you for your time, I'd like to thank Director Hausch and Senior Planner Galbraith for their time and energies. We've been working with them about 10 months trying to put together a building and a plan and a design that meets the city's requirements, and we've made a number of adjustments over time, and I I hope it works. I hope it works for the city. So anyway, if we go to the next slide. Unfortunately, I can't see this, but I'm hoping that it shows a number of consultants, architects, and engineers that have been involved with this project.
That's the next
in addition
slide.
to architect, yeah. In addition to architect Kevin O'Malley, on this call, we have our senior biologist, Dana Riggs. We have our lead civil engineer, Rico Prianto, and we have our landscape architect, Paul Harris. You'll see from the list that we have a number of other consultants, engineers, and the like that have been involved, and their reports are attached to the CEQA documents that were circulated earlier. So if we could go on to the next slide. So I'm hoping this slide shows some of the general plan criteria. We, working with Director Hausch and Senior Planner Galbraith, we tried very hard to conform to the general plan. As I mentioned earlier, we adjustments, and as you can see, these are some of the general plan targets that we've met. And so if we could go to the next slide. I'm hoping that this slide shows the, in addition to the plan objectives that are being met, we this particular project should generate approximately dollars in fees, development fees that would contribute directly to Cotati. The property taxes, which are shared between the counties, but this property currently generates a little under $1,000 a year in property taxes, and upon completion of phase, generate approximately $100,000 property. So that's not a significant number relative to the budget. I want to point the next item, Senior Planner Galbraith, previously working close with the city. We are at the end of Blodgett Street, and not only will that help with deliveries, but I think more, it would require life safety to provide an adequate turnaround there for equipment.
Bert, sorry, this is.
If we go, yeah, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to let you know you are breaking up a bit. And while I think we're capturing most of what you're saying, I don't want us to miss anything really important. So I don't know if maybe you could.
I apologize.
It's okay. I know it's challenging.
Kevin O'Malley, could you take point?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kevin, could you just take lead? Thank you.
That's fine.
I'll be quiet. Thank you, Chairman Murphy.
Not a problem.
Chairperson Murphy.
Yeah, I'll step in. I think we're going to the next slide. So we're on, we move to, I think Bert covered the items on that slide. So we'll move to the tentative construction schedule. This is kind of what Bert has outlined as far as being able to get in and start grading this year and moving forward to occupancy by the end of November next year. So we're trying to get in and grade and be able to kind of work through winter, get the building foundation and slab in, and get the metal building installed on top of that in April to July, July to August. Start putting in electrical, plumbing, mechanical work. Begin asphalting and landscaping in September, basically a year from now. Try on the kind of tail end of the project, and then finish out the office improvements at that same time. Finish out little punch list items and get occupancy in November. So a little over a year away, we're hoping to get Bert's tenant occupied in the building. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I think this was touched on earlier by Joel. But even though this is a large site, we do have one major impact or item that impacts development. That's the California tiger salamander. So essentially every square foot of land that we touch on here for development or to disturb for development, we have to pay a mitigation ratio of 2 to 1. I'll touch on this briefly in our site layout in the next portion, but you can kind of see the points there. So we wanted to keep development compact because of that. Obviously, we have our biologists that prepared a report and can answer any questions dealing with the tiger salamander. And we have already filed for and are working with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So we've got that ball rolling. We're kind of well aware of those timeframes. And permit fees to this point have been paid, and we have an incidental take permit that's pending approval from the CEQA approval, so we can get that filed and get that started. And project obviously will proceed as long as their initial site grading can occur before the end of October. So we've been working with Fish and Wildlife to kind of help make that happen and make sure we can meet that timeline. Next slide. So I'll speak kind of for Bert here, but this is not a speculative building project. Bert has a tenant that he has a relationship with. Is an 11-year relationship with them over in the city of Benicia. And Pods is currently located here in the county up in Santa Rosa. So they're looking to relocate to this facility. So this is really like a build to suit for a tenant that's already in this county. And I think Joel had kind of described already their type of use, but they're a moving and storage company. You've probably seen them. They deliver containers, ship them throughout the state, county and state, and interstate for clients. Clients are not allowed access inside the warehouse. That's where the containers that are filled with people's goods are securely stored. So they have to give 72-hour access or advance notice, if you will, to have their container pulled out if they want access to it. And it's taken outside and allows them to have access to take things out or put things back in. And then it's placed back in the building. Empty containers, that's what the storage is on the west side of the building. Those are just empties. They don't intend to put full or stored containers out there because obviously they want to have security of those units. And as I mentioned, they're relocating from just kind of north of Cotati here up in Santa Rosa, south end of Santa Rosa. Okay, next slide. Brief information about Bert. He kind of splits his time between Marin and Geyserville, but he's a registered Sonoma County voter, so he's somebody that's already involved in the community. He has an engineering background, has been involved with development and owning and managing properties for many years in Northern California. And it's a family business that he owns with his wife, 50% owner, and their son Calvin, who I've worked with also in this project. He's also involved, and they have a commitment to owning this property long term. This is not a build to suit or a speculative project where he's just looking to flip it and sell it. He's got an interest in holding the property and maintaining it. So next slide. I think this is about myself. I don't think I introduced myself when I stepped on, but Bert had. I'm Kevin O'Malley. I work with O'Malley, Wilson, Westfall, and Santa Rosa. I've worked with both Noah and Joel for a number of years. I appreciate being able to work with them again, and kind of a lot of work to get to this point, as Bert had outlined, with all those individuals that we all have to work collaboratively to get to this point. So I thank you guys for being able to get us here. So why don't we go to the 2 slides down to the drawing of the site plan. I'll skip this one because I think you guys have seen that. So just brief comments about the parameters we were working with here on the site. As I said, it's a large site, but it does have some items we had to deal with, one of which is wetlands that kind of occupy that southern, the light gray shaded area along the southern property boundary and out towards the west there. Those are wetlands. So ideally, we were just trying to stay away from interfering with the wetland area. And then on top of that, we have the tiger salamander habitat or potential habitat. So any square foot we touch, we have to pay some pretty healthy fees for. So we try to make the development compact. At the same time, we have the realities of we need vehicular circulation to be able to access the space and make it useful. Because Bert is going to own this property long term, we did take one of the concepts was to look at this building as if in the future, if things changed, that he could be able to lease it out to 2 tenants. So essentially it's designed so that you could have a tenant on both the east side and the west side of the building, separate tenants. So they would each have loading docks and their own circulation, their own office areas in the southeast and southwest corners. And we need to maintain vehicular circulation around for emergency vehicles. So this building has the capability for high pallet storage, and under the fire code, we have to have a 26-foot drive aisle around the building, maintain that access, plus be able to, fire department be able to pull their hoses to 150 feet with all portions of the building. So we can get into questions later, but just briefly speaking to Commissioner Hancock's comment about floodplain, and we did, originally this property did appear to be significantly in the floodplain, a portion of it along the north, but upon survey, we found that actually there was very little of the property, very small portion at the northeast corner, and I believe a very small portion at the northwest corner were actually in the floodplain. Not enough to be limiting the development that we're showing here. We're outside of the floodplain. Let's see. The one comment that was made about the cul-de-sac. So initially we had done a bunch of due diligence with the city and we submitted, and then it was discovered that we would need to provide a public terminus, if you will, to Blodgett and facilitate that vehicular turnaround. So we did, after initial submittal, end up revising the project and scooting a bunch of the development a little bit towards the west to facilitate getting the cul-de-sac in there. And as mentioned, we have some outdoor storage, which is only allowed on the west side of the property. So we use the building to screen outdoor storage because the building is taller than the outdoor storage area. We screen that from Blodgett Street, and then we have some fencing and some screen trees, redwood trees that we're using to screen the north and south portions of that outdoor storage area. The west right now is, other than a fence, is largely left open for landscaping because it is the intent to have a later phase for the site and look at putting a building on the western portion of the site. So we kind of set up circulation so that could be feasible, as well as we didn't want to start planting a bunch of trees on the western boundary of this development and just have to pull them back out to make the development on the west side work. Next slide. Okay, we're just showing the east elevation here, but this zoning district has a 40-foot height limit, and we're a little bit challenged because the tenant has to be able to stack these containers inside the space, and they want to stack them 4 high, so they need a 34-foot clear height. And really, that's one of the primary reasons why Bert is building this building for them, because it's really hard to find a building that has that kind of clear height anywhere in the county. That's not a typical warehouse type storage. A lot of times you'll see that around 20 feet for clear height, but they have a much higher height requirement. So in order to achieve that, we have to keep the roof very flat and allow room for structure. By the time we do that, we're maximizing up to the height limit and have structure tucked in there and obtaining that 34-foot clear height inside the building. So it made us have to go with a very shallow roof design. So a little different than some of the buildings in the business park there where they have more steeper sloping roofs. We didn't really have that ability with this tenant to be able to get low sloping roofs. Otherwise, we would have taken up a significant portion of the building in order to get their storage requirements inside. So that put it with a low sloping roof, you don't really see that slope. So we went with a parapet condition around the perimeter, and we're using at least 3 different panel profiles, which you'll see on the drawings, and some different colors. So the base of the building, we've got a horizontal panel. We're running in a horizontal fashion that goes around and forms the kind of the cornice at the top that sits a little proud of your main body panel, which is sort of that lighter gray color. And then we further pop out the panel at the corners of the building to add interest where we would have our office area. And we extend the height up 3 feet to use those panels as a mechanical screen, where we likely will have some rooftop units to condition the office areas at the southeast and southwest corners. And then we've got skylights and some higher clerestory windows that are bringing daylighting into the space. And we've got a little bit of room for signage, and then we have some trellis elements along the storefront at the office areas to provide some shading and some interest at the office areas. And then we have some transom windows around. The man doors are both for exiting. The single man doors are for exiting and for fire access around the building. Since it is a high pile storage building, we have to have man doors every 100 lineal feet of wall segment. And then we've got the larger roll-ups that are on both the east and west side for circulation through the building for trucks and larger equipment. And then the recessed loading dock roll-up doors, and then one additional roll-up door on each side. So again, these kind of are mirror image sort of sides of the building so that you could have potentially a tenant on each side. Let's see, I think that covers my comments on building design and finishing out what Bert's comments were. So I'll turn it back over to staff or answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Kevin and Bert. Are there additional presentations?
None. We have our civil engineer and our landscape architect are on this meeting, so they're available to answer specific questions. Sorry, and our biologist.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to double check. So I will open it up again to the commission for questions. And why don't I circle back and start with Commissioner Hancock?
Yes, hello, thank you very much. So, so this question really isn't specifically, I know at all the work that you're doing. So a lot of great work, and I've got some questions about the water side of things, and it's more the way that you're fitting in with the Laguna, the fact that we're at the headwaters of the Laguna. And I mean, particularly that's a very wide open plain and particularly downstream. So it's just a question. And I don't know whether it really makes sense, but in that north east corner, is it possible to mark where that 100-year floodplain is, just so that should it ever be exceeded, it can be visible at that location? Now, I'm not too sure that there's a very good hydrological connection with the Laguna, because looking at it from the path, I mean, I think the path is elevated on the Laguna side. So it would be just it's just a request on that, whether or not you think that would be possible. It's really as a service, should there be any flooding, that it would be easy to determine at that point, did it get exceeded?
I guess I'm trying to follow the question. So you're asking if we can mark the 100-year flood with the flood location with a stake or something that marks the elevation of the 100-year flood?
Well, ideally it would be something that would indicate the elevation, and also if it was exceeded, a little gauge of some sort. Now, maybe it really needs to be on the main channel. I don't know, but just if there was it's a lot of work to do all this surveying to get that, those 100-year points. And when you look at the whole situation, it seems unlikely that it would be exceeded, but it's nice to know, should it be exceeded, that there would be a reference point to check on. And you're probably familiar that what happens in the Laguna isn't necessarily the rainfall that is going on in Cotati that drives it. It's all the rainfall in the rest of the Laguna that then backs up. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a steady state that rises. And just if whether or not you think, I mean, if you say, look, it's going to be too difficult, then that would be, it just wouldn't make any sense.
Well, I don't know if we have the ability to put the I don't think we have them, the civil drawings up here that might show that, but they're pretty small little areas and
Right.
tucked up in those north. I'm just wondering who would they be really visible to? Would it be useful because there's no paths or anything, to them? Obviously the paths are on the creek area or on the north side.
Right.
And I don't know.
It could be something against the fence that would be either seen from the road outside, also seen from what's essentially your retention area 1 from your parking lot, if there was a clear line of sight. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. That was an idea that was, it has been brought up in Cotati in the past. In talking to the neighbor, they thought there'd been some flooding at some point there, but it was unlikely, in my opinion, to be flooding from my guesswork, really, from the Laguna. Let me ask another water question. And it's really it's partly an education. You've done a lot of work with the NPDS for the stormwater to really manage it. And you're talking about the 10-year design storm versus the 100-year check storm. Could you just talk a little bit, go through what you've done with stormwater coming off the hard surfaces and the way that it would then flow into, hopefully unpolluted, into the Laguna?
Yeah, I think I'll turn that one over to Rico, our civil engineer, who's worked on all the stormwater design, to answer that question.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rico Prianto. I'm a principal engineer for Cotati Design Group. Essentially, the state of California requires us to treat 100% of the water that falls from the sky and ends on our site. We have, they're called BMPs, which are essentially special medias of different types of soils with extra storage area for water. And the idea is the water will hit the roof or the roadway or sidewalk, flow via overland flow into these plant or treatment facilities. And the majority of the pollutants in rainfall is in that the first drop that hits, and then it flows and it carries the pollutants with it. So we're forced to treat the 2-year storm essentially, which would be the first flush, considered first flush for pollutants. Anything above that, we would design for a 10-year treatment or to handle the 10-year storm. And then any of our conveyance facilities or facilities that collect water and then send it off site would be designed for the 100-year storm. And that's all consistent with county requirements and the state general permit for stormwater quality. We also have what's called hydromodification on the site, which are big chambers underneath the roadways that store the water, because obviously we're going from a field to a paved site. And so more of the water that hits the ground is going to run off the site and cause problems potentially with flooding downstream. So we are required to, and that's where that 10-year storm design comes in. We're required to collect the stormwater, attenuate it or slow it down and store it and release it at the historic rate. So we don't add any additional problems that didn't exist before the development was constructed. Does that satisfy?
Yes, thank you. No, it's just useful to, I mean, it's an evolving area and particularly of concern with the, the impacts being in the Laguna de Santa Rosa. I've got one sort of question on some of the wording that is, I mean, in the ISMND, you've got some more detailed designs, it looks like, but you reference, or somebody references in there in that there's in the BMPs that they're inspected for ponded water. And it's saying this very generic thing, and there's been design issues elsewhere in Sonoma County that with water coming down, how can you infiltrate it? So how can you spread it, sink it, and infiltrate it into the ground? But that implies that it actually can sit there. And so the language you're using is just saying if ponded water, then it might require to be removed because of mosquito breeding. So we have this problem of infiltration in Sonoma County that we want it to infiltrate, which means it has to sit there. And I'm just wondering if there's some better language that can be put in this. This is packet page 84 on the maintenance, that if ponded water and further maintenance to prevent mosquito breeding, then something should be done, rather than what currently says if it ponds, then you might have to deal with it. Because as I understand it, for mosquitoes to breed, the temperature of the water has to be above a threshold, I think 15 degrees Celsius, and there for a number of days. So ponding for some days is allowed.
Yeah, so unfortunately, state law requires us to collect this water and store it, slowly infiltrate it in at a
Which is good. I'm not participating.
Yeah.
You know, we want that. We want it to infiltrate as much as
Right.
possible, and lots of little projects will do something. So I'm not disagreeing
Right.
with that.
Yeah, it's designed not to be carrying water. So that's where the maintenance portion of that comes into play. Is if it's holding water for an extended amount of time, then there's something wrong. The soil has been plugged up somehow by fines or some other issue. It's not graded flat, because these planters are supposed to be graded flat so that they don't create ponding issues on a regular basis. It's really just for a day or two. It's required for us to pond up, infiltrate a specific quantity of water through the various media soil. And anything over a 2-year storm, first flush, there's overflow inlets in these, so any additional water would be instantly transported to the underground holding chambers to slow it down, and then ultimately into the waterway.
Right. So there's that time period. I mean, I think it's something like 3 weeks. If the water sits for 3 weeks above 15 degrees Celsius, then it becomes mosquito breeding. But beneath that, I mean, how will the maintenance of this site really, I'm really asking for a longer time for some of this to sit, but that it can be very clear to people, any maintenance crews in the future, that they don't have to worry about if it's just sitting there for a couple of days.
Yeah, it's all spelled out. There will be a very specific maintenance plan that has to be filed with the county and put on title for each of these different facilities on site. And it's very explicit on how to inspect them, how to maintain them, how to ensure that they're not holding water. They're designed to draw down once the rainstorm ends within a couple of days. And so that's how they're designed to filter the water and make sure that it's clean.
Right, and so I appreciate that. Okay, well, that was just my point, just to try and sort of define that time period.
There's a very specific maintenance schedule and requirements, and they force us to file it with the county and put it on title so that it lives forever with the project, regardless of whether Bert owns it or he sells it to another owner down the road. The same maintenance requirements will stay with the property.
Okay, well, that's good, and I'm just advocating for it to be clear. So hopefully that's so. So the other area I just wanted to highlight a little bit of is I've been involved in some of the creeks in Cotati and in some of the restoration activities that are there, and with permits and things that have been put together. But one of the things we have found is some of the plastic netting from construction sites has ended up in the creek. And so I know you've got on packet page 60, bio 8, the plastic synthetic netting on erosion control shouldn't be used for CTS, shouldn't be used because CTS might get captured in it, but I would definitely be asking, and I thought maybe this is a question for the city as well. I thought that was a requirement for anything in the city, that the netting there shouldn't be something that can get into the waterways. Plastic netting there should be biodegradable.
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to that, Commissioner Hancock, without doing the research. But I do know that all of the stormwater prevention measures that are installed during construction, and then the monitoring and mitigation stormwater infrastructure will be 100% up to city standards.
Okay, good. And do you know if that includes no plastic netting, or at least that all plastic netting should be tracked and removed?
That's why I'd have to research it with Public Works, because they implement the grading permit requirements portion of the building permits. But I know they do regular inspections and are very explicit in their stormwater mitigation requirements and management. I will bring this up with Public Works Director Scott and make sure that I'm fully up to date on what the requirements are for that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, now I think packet page 60, which is under the ISMD Bio 8, requires that it be not plastic for specifically for CTS, but thank you very much. That's basically my comments on there, but thank you very much. An interesting project, a lot of work there. Really appreciate all the diagrams that we got. Nice to have them on paper to be able to look at them.
Yeah, just to clarify that mitigation measure is part of the project. So that mitigation measure that's called out is something that is a requirement of this project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hancock. I did want to circle back and just make sure that you were satisfied with the discussion around the flood marker. Did you get the response you were looking for to at least close that out?
I think I did. I think I just put it out there. I don't think it's, I think it's a difficult area to do and probably should be, if it can be done easily, it would be nice to have it there as a service. So I'll just leave it like that without putting any requirements. But it's not very hydraulically connected, I think, with the creek as one of the problems. So it's a good thing for the development. I mean, for the developer. But it's a challenge for Cotati just for us to think about separately. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing that back up.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Rodriguez for any questions.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. How many pods can fit inside the warehouse?
Give me a minute here. I can find that number, unless Bert has it from his memory.
Kevin, I don't have that on the tip. Kevin, I don't have that on the tip of my tongue. Sorry.
Okay, well, I'll look it up here as we're talking. Let's see, somewhere. Okay, somewhere around 800.
Okay. And how big is the warehouse in Santa Rosa compared to this one?
That's a good question. I don't know if Bert knows that.
I believe, Kevin, I have not been inside of it and I have not seen the lease, but I believe it is. I'd just be speculating, but I would suspect that it's in the 30 to 35,000 square foot range, just on a visual.
Yeah, that would have been my guess, is like at least half the size, probably not smaller than half the size of this building. So 25, 30,000 range is Bert's probably about right. That's about what I was going to guess.
And they're wanting to move because they just need a bigger space? Are they full all the time in Santa Rosa?
Yes. So as the Sonoma County grows and there's more activity, their business has done well there, and they want to expand to service their clientele, and so that's and future growth as well.
Okay. And then you mentioned that half of the building could be leased at a later time, and that there are plans for a later phase on the west side of the building. Do you have any idea?
So I'll jump in on that real quick, Bert. The building was designed just because Bert wants to own it long term and have it, be flexible in case anything happens to the primary tenant that's going to occupy the whole building. So just to be clear on that, Pods wants to occupy the entire building, but Bert wants to have flexibility if he's building something to be able to lease it to, you know, 1 or 2 tenants in the future. So it's just designed for flexibility in the future in case Pods happens to leave, that he's got a building he could, it's a little easier probably to lease with, you know, 2 25,000 square foot spaces than 1 50,000 square feet. So each side of the building's set up to, you know, have loading dock, warehouse access, you know, office area. So he wanted to have that flexibility. But right now, there's no plans for any other things other than Pods.
Okay. And if that were to happen, would the empty pods that are outside then be moved to inside of the warehouse?
If I could, Kevin, I hope
Sure.
folks can hear me okay. But really, what Kevin's referring to, Pods is going to lease 100% of the building. And so there's no plans or nothing envisioning them shrinking. If for some reason at the end of their lease, we're not able to come to terms on a new lease, what Kevin is outlining is that we would be in a position to lease this to a different tenant, 1 or 2 tenants. And so in that case, Pods would no longer be present. Commissioner, I believe you also asked about a future phase of the project. Was that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So we, as Kevin noted earlier, we've laid this out with the help of our civil engineers as well, from the utility standpoint, so that we can have a second phase. That second building might be in the range of 30 to 35,000 square feet. There's nothing before the commission right now related to that, but that's something that we are considering. If that were to go forward, we'd still avoid the wetlands, and we'd still need to mitigate for California tiger salamanders, specifically for that additional building. But that's in our, that's something we're considering, but we don't have any plans to present today.
Okay. That's all the questions I had right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. Okay, I will move into my own questions here. So just for the sake of transparency, I'm trying to gather more information as I'm thinking about how this really is outside of the scope of what we've agreed to for our Cotati land use code. And the reason for that is because I specifically remember that we did call this out at some point when we were discussing updates to the code to ensure that it did not include storage, like major commercial storage. So that concerns me a little because I recall that conversation. I think my first maybe comment or question is from the staff, if you guys can keep me honest, if you feel like that, I know we don't have the notes in front of us, but if there was something different there that you remember from those discussions that I think took place maybe almost a year ago or earlier this year, please let me know. But that really stood out in my mind as something that we had talked about as a commission. So I'm trying to better understand kind of the scope and also the benefits. I wanted to get a better sense of how the pods are used. So I've seen them, advertised before. I know people use them for moving. That's kind of how I picture them. But I wanted to ask the applicant if you guys could give me more information. If you know, what's the average, what's the typical clientele? Is it business? Would it be possibly local businesses? Do they keep their stuff there long-term as a storage facility? Is it more short-term, moving stuff, placing it somewhere, moving it to the next location? I realize that, maybe you can only tell me so much, but if you have any more information about how the pods company is generally used, I'd be really interested in hearing that.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. From our understanding, and as Kevin noted earlier, we've been in business with pods for 11 years. Although we don't know their specific operations, but in preparation for this application, we did drill down on it. And it's our understanding that approximately 85% of the pods are used for residential purposes and about 15% for businesses. Of the residential users, the majority of them are moving into or out of the area. And those containers are stored inside the building until they've relocated to their new location, and it's then delivered to that site, and the person unpacks it. And so in terms of length of storage, there is a monthly fee for storing. So it's my understanding that these are, in general, not long-term storage situations, that they're rather associated with a residential home relocation. Does that answer?
That does. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Chair Murphy, I can speak to the other issues either now or when you're ready.
Yeah, now would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I just first commend you. That is an excellent memory, and you are 100% spot on. In our discussions on the economic development ordinance that was brought before the Planning Commission, this was actually in I think it was February of 2020 is when it was finalized with the City Council. So I think you all heard it in November, December of 19. But we specifically decided to exclude mini storage as an allowable use in Cotati. And I had this discussion with the applicants, and they are pretty specific in making a distinction between pods as a moving and storage and warehousing use, separate from the mini storage use. I did point out that this would likely be a topic of discussion, but in looking at all the specifics with regards to land use definitions and codes, we did ultimately end up aligning with their perspective that this is not a mini storage use. And especially the way that the land use change is being defined, so the actual language that's proposed to go into the code, mini storage is proposed to remain as a prohibited use in Cotati, and we will not be recommending or bringing forward anything with a recommendation for mini storage. And then to kind of flush out your thoughts on it, it is a cost benefit discussion, right? And so we saw it as an opportunity to develop one of the remaining undeveloped portions of our industrial area, which is one of our job centers, to finish out the street in a city standard cul-de-sac that allows all the existing folks who have deliveries and traffic there to make a safe turnaround in that cul-de-sac that this project would fund and develop itself. And then also to get ourselves positioned to have a large warehouse building in this location. This tenant does provide some warehousing for individual businesses, but it's mainly in personal warehouse use, pods. But then, as mentioned, it would also tee up development of the remainder of the site with another warehouse building, which would further provide more opportunities for additional industrial uses. And then the last thing I want to point out is the last chapter of the general plan, the implementation chapter, includes a policy that says we should combine all of the allowable uses in both the commercial industrial zoning district and the general industrial zoning district to be more consistent with our industrial land use regulations, in addition, or essentially to help make development and business more consistent in that part of town. And it's interesting, the purpose of the general industrial zoning district mentions warehouse. So the land use chapter or the tables do not specifically allow warehouse, but the purpose section says that it is the purpose of that district. So all of those factors combined to result in the recommendation for a support of this change. But it is rather nuanced, and I appreciate your good memory and your good question.
Thank you for that. That actually provides, I think, really good context. I think you make a good point in that there is a difference between self-storage and this sort of storage. So I appreciate that because I don't think I was looking at it that way. A follow-up question for that, for maybe either of you, is do we know what the signage on the building will look like? So now I'm kind of picturing, I know this isn't going to be a big orange and white self-storage building, but now I'm kind of picturing the space and wondering how will it present itself?
Yeah, so we look at signs as an individual planning process and an individual permit. They need approval if you look at the packet design, it does anticipate a sign location, which I appreciate Mr. O'Malley putting. A lot of architects hate to identify the sign location on their buildings, even though every commercial building will have a sign on it. And so I appreciate him identifying the space where that sign is likely to go. And from staff standpoint, it wasn't obtrusive, and it kind of was a sign placed on the architecture rather than the architecture trying to be an additional sign, which is always helpful.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry, I just realized I was talking on mute. Thank you. Those were all of my questions for now. So I'll save any other comments until after the public questions and comments. Okay, so
one more question, if I could.
Oh, absolutely.
So just a question maybe about the combination of landscaping and CTS and the curbs. We have seen elsewhere in Cotati that some of the CTS do come out of a breeding site. But they then get that southern side where you've got the landscaping. The landscaping looks very nice. Is that something that was considered, just that if there are any CTS that come from maybe the adjacent property or anything that's on there and they get into the hardscape, get across the landscaping? What are you doing for that sort of landscaping hardscape connection, or if anything on the CTS? Is there any room that you have got to consider that?
If possible, I'd like senior biologist Dana Riggs to comment on it. Dana, are you able to join us or make your unmute? Okay.
Can you hear me?
It appears
Sorry.
that Dana.
Hello?
Yeah.
Just joining in.
Please, Dana, continue.
Sorry, it took a minute to switch over I'm in the attendees instead of a panelist. So yeah, to answer the question, I think as I understand, I'm not sure if I clearly understood because I think the mic broke up a little bit.
I can repeat it again if that would be useful.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
So just concerned, the CTS are little critters. There may not be any there, but if they are, they really allowing them free movement, I think would be an objective. But I guess, again, this is maybe a heavy regulated area from CDFW, but just is there any view on or on the landscaping that they could move if they come into it, move across it and really escape again? Because if there's 4-inch curbs, which they fall over, then they're not going to be able, which getting into the hardscape, they're not going to be able to really get back unless they've given special design.
Yeah, actually, yeah, CDFW is very specific on excluding CTS from any of the the hardscape areas because they don't want to have take down the road as a result of activities that are occurring on the site. So the requirement is for BERT to mitigate for all impacts associated with the footprint of the project. And then beyond the curbs, the landscaping has been designed to be compatible with CTS needs. So there will be permanent fencing between the landscaped areas and the construction footprint to prevent CTS from ever being impacted down the road. But the landscaping has been also designed to accommodate CTS in the future.
Okay, very interested to see how that works out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That ends my other question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hancock. Commissioner Rodriguez, do you have any other follow-up questions?
Just one. How many solar panels are you considering to place on the roof?
If I could, this is Bert Sandell. So our plans are to put in an array adequate to cover the initial cost of, the initial energy use of pods. I personally am a huge fan of alternative energy, and as should down the road there be a change in the use and pods is not in there, I would like to take advantage of our roof system to capture as much electricity as we can. We may talk to PG&E to see if we can be an excess provider. I don't know a lot about that program right now, but at this point, our plans are to try to cover their use.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. Okay, so we will move into public comment. Just a reminder to please state your name for the record, and I will turn it over to opening it up to public comment.
Thank you, Chair Murphy. For our attendees tonight, please use your raised hand icon if you'd like to speak. That will end public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I will circle back to make sure that if there are general comments from the commission or any other follow-up questions that we provide time for that. So we'll go around one more time, starting with Commissioner Hancock.
Yes, I think it's a project that fits with the location. I do think we've got an issue generally with traffic that we need to, or the way that large vehicles could move through some of the parts of Cotati. But I think for this project, I'm think it's pretty good. I think there's one set of wording maybe in the in the resolution that maybe needs a little bit of wordsmithing, and that could be on packet page 168. The resolution references Petaluma Fire Prevention Bureau, and perhaps that means the Rancho Adobe Fire District. That would be the only comment I've got on the actual wording that's there.
Commissioner Hancock, I'm sorry, could you repeat? I'm looking at it right now just to see if we can make that change. You said package page 168.
Yeah. So, and it's CFC 3201-4 under the evacuation plan. And right at the bottom, it says this plan is required by the Petaluma Fire Prevention Bureau. And I know RAFD, the Rancho Adobe, share with Petaluma. So this might have been a cut and paste mistake. And it might be the fire department that's made this, but maybe staff could comment on that, that it should either be eliminated altogether because it's already covered above, or it should be that the RAFD, the Rancho Adobe Fire District. Perhaps I could just ask staff if they have a...
Yes.
You're correct. We'll just reference Rancho Adobe Fire Protection District. It is their language, and I believe it was a leftover remaining language from past project.
Right. So I did read all the way through it. Just...
Thank you, Commissioner Hancock. Any other questions or comments?
No, I think the project fits. I appreciate all the work that's gone into it to producing the documents. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Commissioner Rodriguez. Any comments or questions?
I just want to comment on all the hard work this was put into, and the architecture to the building. I think it's really nice, and I think it fits in well in that area. I did have one more question, actually. It had to do with hazardous materials not being allowed to be stored there. But if the pods are taken to the customer's home and then they fill it up and then they call to come and pick it up, how do you know if there's hazardous materials in there or not?
I think that is a question for our applicant, so I'm not sure if Kevin or Bert could answer that.
Yeah, I was just checking to see if Bert
yes,
is still on. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I'm here, Kevin. I was muted. Sorry. Right. So pod specifically disallows hazardous material storage in the containers. They don't open every container and inspect it, but that is certainly the intention. You know, I suppose there's bad actors in the world. Our hope is that they're not in the pods, but they're pretty rigorous about their rules and requirements, and that's all I can tell you right now.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments, Commissioner Rodriguez?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, I want to also mimic what was already said and thank everyone for the presentation and the thorough overview of what you guys are proposing here. I'm a little uncomfortable with us going outside of scope of the land use code. I know we've considered items for that before. It's very helpful to hear the feedback on how this does differ from a self-storage. I think that's a great point. And I try really hard to kind of stay in my lane as a planning commissioner and allow the city council to look at it more holistically and comprehensively for the city as they make their decision. So I do feel like, given the fact that this still does stay away from the look, feel, and service of self-storage, and probably the traffic going in and out, if it were more of a self-storage, I feel more comfortable with being a bit lenient on making it an exception here. As we were talking through things, I had two other questions or thoughts that came up. The first was around security. I don't believe I saw anything in the packet on that. And so I just wanted to ask, how do you handle security in a building like this that is clearly holding a lot of valuables, and it's in a space that's fairly removed?
Yes, this is Bert Sandell. So the tenant pods would be responsible for security. What they have in place at their other location that they lease from us in Benicia is a third-party alarm system with motion detectors and also door activation sensors. So it's a fairly sophisticated system, and I'm not sure what their protocols are. It's part of their operation, and as a landlord, I'm not involved. But I do know they definitely have a security system.
Thank you. And then I think the last comment I would make, and this is, as we discussed, the discussion around signage is separate, but I do want to put it out there on the record as others review this moving forward. I really would prefer in this situation if we could keep signage to a minimum or a bit less obtrusive. I think you guys did a wonderful job at planning a building that I think, you know, kind of fits in and almost camouflages, as you will, with the colors, and not being too, you know, not standing out too much, especially considering it is such a tall building. So I think along those lines, it would be nice if we ensured that the signage wasn't too, I don't know if I can think of the right word, but I just don't want it to be too large or too extensive that it would be standing out significantly for others who are in the area, if that's possible. And that is it for my comments. So I think we will move into, let me just ask one more time if there's any other information from staff or the applicant before we move into the resolution. Okay, seeing no other discussion, I will ask if we have a motion for this resolution.
So just to check in perhaps, Chair, I think the resolutions have to be taken in order, probably the last one first. And if that's the case, I'll make a motion to put it forward, but maybe staff could actually give us some guidance on that.
Yeah, so in all land use decisions, the CEQA resolution has to be read first for the CEQA determination. And then after that, it would be your choice. It's flexible, given that it's a recommendation to the council.
Okay, perfect. For timing's sake, could you list for us the page numbers of the resolutions we should be doing first?
Bear with me, Senior Planner Galbraith is having technical difficulties.
I think I may have found it. Just if you could confirm, I believe it's package page 148.
That's correct. That's the first resolution, and then you can read them in order. That's correct.
Perfect. Okay. So with that being said, I will ask, does anyone have a motion for our first resolution on package page 148?
I'll make the resolution on that one. I was hoping not to be part of that one, but I guess it's part of the process. So a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cotati recommending City Council adoption of the Mitigated Negative Declaration and Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program for the Sandell Distribution Warehouse located at 597 Hellman Lane at the west end of Blodgett Street, and making the required finding pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. So I will put that forward as a resolution, and I believe it needs a second.
I second.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call for the vote?
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Hancock,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy.
Yes. Okay, moving on to our resolution on packet page 152. And just a quick note, I'm sorry to interrupt here. I'm not sure I see resolution numbers on these. Is that a problem?
They get assigned once they're finalized.
Okay, so thank you.
So I'll move to put that one forward as well. So I'll read it out in full. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cotati recommending City Council approval of design review and a use permit to allow the construction of a new 54,064 square foot warehouse to be used as a moving and storage company with the outdoor storage of portable storage containers and a 15% parking reduction located on an 8.48 acre site at 597 Hellman Lane at the west end of Blodgett Street.
Do we have a second? I can
second.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. And a roll call?
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Hancock,
Yes.
Chair Murphy.
Yes. And a motion for the final resolution on page 172.
I could let somebody else do that one.
I'll motion. Resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cotati recommending the City Council approve an amendment to Section 17.20.030 to include warehousing in the stated purpose of the Commercial Industrial District, and approve an amendment to Section 17.22.020, Table 2-3 of the Zoning Code to allow storage warehouse indoor storage in the Commercial Industrial Zoning District, subject to the approval of a use permit.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Neil, or Commissioner Hancock. Okay, and a roll call?
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Hancock,
Yes.
Chair Mosley.
Yes.
Well, good luck to the applicants with the process. We've enabled the next load of hard work, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, well, no, appreciate all your comments.
Thank you very much for the thorough presentation.
You bet.
Thank
Thank you to
you.
staff also. for getting
Everyone,
us to this point.
greatly appreciated.
Absolutely, thank you. We'll move into item F, reports by staff.
Thank you, Chair Murphy. Just briefly, I wanted to kind of touch on some of the things that are likely to be coming down from the staff perspective. And I'm going to touch on the housing element update, and I will let Senior Planner JP Harries, if he is interested, touch on his update. But as you know, we've all been discussing RENA. The appeal process for RENA appeal period has ended. And so now those appeals are being considered and are going to be voted on, I believe, towards the end of October by ABAG MTC. The County of Sonoma and the Town of Windsor both filed appeals with their RENA numbers. The commission will recall Cotati was allocated somewhere approximately 250 units, I think 247. Through our current RENA, that is a draft number, and what the ABAG MTC staff have indicated is that if they do support any of the appeals from the other jurisdictions and reduce their RENA allocations, those units need to remain in the county and are likely to increase the RENA allocations of other jurisdictions. The location of where those are has not been determined or decided, but just know that our RENA is still draft and will not likely be finalized until early winter. That being said, we are moving forward with our housing element update process, and we expect to be bringing a consultant contract to the City Council at their second meeting this month to get them formally under contract and allow the process to really get going. There's been a lot of changes to state law with regards to housing element updates. And so just please, as you talk to your friends and neighbors, just encourage them to participate. It's very important that we get a lot of engagement from the community. We really want to hear from people. We really appreciate all the work folks have already done participating in both of our surveys. That set us up really well with our consultants to be able to hand them off a lot of data that we've already gathered. But we really need to focus on reaching some of our more harder to reach members of the community. And we're hiring a community engagement specialist to help us make sure that we do that and we're successful in hearing from everyone. So just know that that's likely to get going. And we are currently targeting the meeting of October 12th as a potential joint Planning Commission City Council meeting, where we would hold the kickoff and kind of do a Housing 101 presentation. I haven't shared that with the council yet, so you guys are getting the preview, and obviously everyone will have to we'll have to make sure it meets everyone's schedules. But just if you could tentatively hold that, we'll send out the calendar updates or invites for that meeting and see if we can get it going. But we are hoping to get that moving relatively shortly after getting folks under contract so we can really get going. It's going to be a year-long process, and so I know some folks don't, they look at that and say, oh, I'll participate at some point, but we really need to hear from folks as early as possible so we can start to draft some policies to meet the state mandates that we have with regards to housing. And with that, I will turn it over to Senior Planner Harries to make a brief announcement of his own.
I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Murphy. I just want to put the Planning Commission, just make you alert to the fact that we're going to be kicking off the bike and pedestrian master plan process, update process. The plan was developed in 2008 and then was updated in 2014. So it's going on 7 years. And a big part of that plan is the project list that is included in that. And it's important that we have a good and up-to-date bike and pedestrian master plan, because it is the best avenue we have for getting funding for our bike and pedestrian projects that we need in the city. So, so Monday, September 20th, at the next Planning Commission, you'll be meeting as both the Planning Commission and the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And that will be the kickoff meeting for this. And at that meeting, really what I want to discuss at that meeting is going to be plan contents, what we want the plan to contain, the work plan for putting together all the elements that we want in the plan, and a schedule. So I will come with kind of a draft of what I feel that should be. And we'll be looking forward to hearing your input and recommendations and comments on that. And then obviously part of this plan is we're going to try to have a substantial public outreach component to it of various pieces. And that's actually going to start tomorrow. So we're going to be tabling at the farmers market to right away start getting people's comments. We're going to have some maps there, comment cards, sign-up sheets. So do come by and, come say hi. Then also in preparation for that, I would also invite you to go to the community development section of our website and go ahead and download and read the bike and pedestrian master plan from 2014. I think that would be a good foundation for what, what is a bike and pedestrian master plan? What does it look like and where are we going? Or what do we want to see in the future? And that's really it. I just want to let you know to, take a look at that bike plan, and that is the plan going forward. We have been talking about this for a while, just briefly, but there's a lot of things. Well, we were hoping to coordinate with the Sonoma County Transportation Authority on a grant. Unfortunately, they learned just last month that they didn't receive that grant. So we're just going to continue to move forward with it. And also we're trying to make our effort work together with what we're doing on a couple other efforts, which is the countywide Vision Zero program, which talks about reducing traffic fatalities and pedestrian fatalities on roadways. As well, we're developing a local roadway safety plan. So both of those efforts, we're collecting a lot of data. And so it's really an ideal situation to kind of bring all these parts together into a bike and pedestrian master plan. So that's another website you may want to look at, is the work that we're doing. And if you go to the home page, you can get to that link, the homepage of the city of Cotati, with the local roadway safety plan. And there's actually a map that you can kind of highlight areas of concern that you have, and they can be bike or pedestrian. That's not necessarily at all related to just cars. So I invite you to go there as well. And then anyway, our big discussion will kick off in 2 weeks, but I just want to put you, give you a heads up that that's coming. And that's it. That's all I have.
Got a
Chair
question
Murphy?
for Noah, if that works.
Absolutely, I'm ready.
Chair Murphy, if I can interject, I've got a attendee with their hand raised. When you get a moment.
Okay, thank you. I think what I will do is we'll start with questions from the commissioners, and then we can open it back up, I believe, to public questions or comments. So I know Commissioner Hancock's probably very excited about the bike and pedestrian plan, so I'm going to start with him.
So yes, thank you, Chair. Just really asking on Noah's report if there was just where the news was on the design by right, the housing element, which I think I did miss the last part of the meeting and the Planning Commission, but I did listen to the City Council about it. So I'm just wondering what the status is on that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So SB 35 is in effect. So right now, a developer could propose an SB 35 project. And the state continues to churn out new legislation allowing by right housing. I would encourage you all to look into SB 9, which was just recently signed by the governor and allows every lot to be split essentially throughout the state. So, and we'll talk about that. But the City Council really appreciated the direction and comments from the Planning Commission and has requested some additional changes be made to further fine tune those design guidelines. And those are going back to the council for what we anticipate would be the first reading of the ordinance to put them into the code on their next meeting of September, I believe it's the 28th. Yeah, they're not, so not 1 week from today, but on the 28th, they'll be going back for a first reading of the ordinance.
Thank you. That's the only question I had for Noah.
Okay. Commissioner Rodriguez, do you have questions?
No questions or report.
Thank you very much. I had two. The first was, I apologize. I think I heard this incorrectly, but when you were referencing Sonoma, the town of Sonoma and Windsor filing appeals, I wasn't sure if you said we were as well, or if you were just referencing that. Okay, that's what I
The county of Sonoma and the town of Windsor.
County. Okay, thank you. And then my second question was in regard to the bike and pedestrian master plan. I'm sure you guys are already planning to do this, but would it be possible to send those links out to all of us, since I know we're missing 2 commissioners this evening, and I just want to make sure that they have that information before the 20th.
Yeah, absolutely. I can send that out. For other people that are just listening or maybe watching this after the meeting, if you go to the City of Cotati's webpage, cotaticity.org, and you scroll over to the Community Development Department, you can find the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan listed under citywide planning documents. Or you could just do a search for it, and I'm sure it would pop up. So, but I'm happy to send the links to the commissioners, you bet.
Thank you. We will open it up to public questions or comments.
And I've got one report.
Okay, and then I will go into item G, absolutely. So this is, we'll open it up to public question or comments in regard to the reports by staff.
Go ahead, Lori.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I hear you. Thank you.
You've not had the webcast for about 15 minutes now. The last time it was, you were starting to make a motion on the UPS, so I signed on to Zoom. But so the last 15 minutes hasn't been probably recorded on the webcast. So anyways, you guys need to fix that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us know. We'll look into that to make sure it did get recorded. Do we have any other items from the public?
No, that'll end public comment.
Great, thank you. And thanks for letting me know that someone raised their hand. So with that, we'll move into item G, which is reports by the commission. And I'll hand it over to Commissioner Hancock.
Yes, good evening. Thank you. I just to let you know that I attended a presentation at Blue Heron Hall, which is part of the Laguna de Santa Rosa Foundation. And there was a presentation there by the North Coast Water Quality District on the progress of the TMDL. So they have been working on the water quality, the total maximum daily load of pollutants within the laguna, and they're starting to finalize that document. And I think they expect one out pretty soon. But we are at the headwaters within that area, so it's it's something that will be a long-term vision plan, as I understand it. So that's primarily the report I wanted to give. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hancock. I'll just double check one more time. Commissioner Rodriguez, did you have any items?
No report.
Okay, thank you. And I have no additional reports as well. So with that, I believe we've gone through all of our items this evening, and we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you and have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nicely done meeting.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
night.